Welcome to The Simpsons Taught Me Everything, where every episode starts with a couch gag, which is what J.D. Vance calls a blowjob. That was it, that's the gag. My name's Michael, and as usual, I'm about to zoom in on a single Simpsons joke and unpack what it's a reference to the point that you forget what it ever even felt like for something to be funny. You'll just know stuff instead. That bone in your elbow that makes you feel weird when it gets hit, that'll just be called your regular bone, one of many. Today, we're obsessing over Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The episode that introduced Danny DeVito to the Simpsons-verse as Homer's long-lost brother Herb. Don't click away. FYI, that title is a reference to the same thing the Coen Brothers movie title is a reference to, which is the fictional movie that the main character in the 1941 Preston Sturges flick Sullivan's Travels sets out to make to redeem his career and say something important after a lifetime spent directing light comedies. Preston Sturges movies were influential to a lot of old school joke writers, and Sullivan's also makes the underlying point that there's something inherently noble in the simple act of making people laugh.
Watch this. Hello, Alphonse. I've got a riddle for you. Why is a raven like a writing desk? I don't know. Why is a...
So it's no wonder comedy writers allude to it a lot. But that's not even what I want to talk to you about, though. That's not even the bone redefining part. If you remember the ep, you probably also remember that Herb is an automobile tycoon, and he lets Homer design a car so stupid that it kills the company and ruins his life.
I'm ruined!
It's got fins and bubble domes, and the horn plays La Cucaracha.
I want a horn here, here, and here. You can never find a horn when you're mad. And they should all play La Cucaracha.
And do, Mr. S.
And I'm pretty sure it releases the dogs or the bees in their mouths. When they bark, they shoot bees at you. Car sucks, guys.
Any questions?
The Homer was probably inspired by a couple of famously failed cars, but the one that I think best matches its specific vibe is Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion car, which looked like, well, let's be honest, a green turd. A nice, firm, well-rounded turd, the turd of a vigorous and healthy person, but a turd nonetheless. If you've heard of Buckminster Fuller, it's probably as the guy who invented the geodesic dome, or a random name on one of the headstones in the intro sequence of Treehouse of Horror 3. Fuller was an inventor, philosopher, and futurist with big Professor from Futurama energy. He dreamed big and he built wacky. He also loved to make up long and stupid words like tensegrity and omni-interaccommodative, which is funny because his whole thing was about efficiency, trying to do more with less. As part of that effort, Buckminster developed both the Dymaxion house and Dymaxion car. Dymaxion being a mashup of the words dynamic, maximum, and tension. Really? I would have gone with Namamumten, but that's just me. The car only had one back wheel and was made in the most aerodynamic shape available at the time, out of strong, light aluminum sheeting. Notably, the back wheel could turn a full 90 degrees.
You're describing how to parallel park.
Making it much easier to parallel park or turn on a dime. That's actually a feature a bunch of old cars had that they should totally bring back. Even more notably though, the Dymaxion car was intended to eventually form the core of a system of attachments that would allow it to turn into a boat or plane at the user's whim. That part of the project never got off the ground. I would say no pun intended, but we both know it was, which is the only time people usually say that. Fucking liars! Although the Dymaxion car was a big hit at the 1933 World's Fair, the theme of which was a century of progress. Other successful exhibits that year included an incubation room where the public was invited to roam around and gawk at strangers' babies, a blackface minstrel show, and a midget city, employing 60 of what I can only imagine are the surliest little people ever assembled in a non-Oz context. A Noz text. You like that one, Bucky? Huh? He knows what he did. The Dymaxion car was super wobbly and only safe to drive at slow speeds. Even then, safe might be too strong a word, considering one of the early prototypes crashed at relatively slow speeds, folded like Superman on laundry day, and crushed the driver inside. You couldn't crush Fuller's futuristic dreams, though. Much like the domes he designed, they were relatively uncrushable, despite being wildly impractical and kind of just a stupid novelty in the end. See, before we were living in late end stage capitalism, there was this period of mid end stage capitalism when everyone thought the steady march of science and technology would inevitably mean the future was perfect.
New technologies?
This simple notion is where we get the Jetsons and Fallout's anti-cheerful retro future aesthetic. It was a time of miracle and wonder when men with vision were empowered to take big, crazy swings and misfire hilariously. So what changed? Let's answer that question with the story of another beautiful failure, Preston Tucker, whose life was immortalized in the omni-underappreciated Francis Ford Coppola movie Tucker, the Man in His Dream. Tucker's specific dream was simple, more along the lines of that Dyson vacuum cleaner weirdo than the professor. Dude just wanted to make a good car. And by all accounts, he did. It was called the Tucker 48, nicknamed the Tucker Torpedo, and was essentially an elegant combining of all kinds of cutting-edge engineering and safety features that made it handily ahead of its time. Tucker was an obsessive car nut, focused on improving the car in a sensible, scientific way. He would study what car makers all over the world were doing, determine what innovations rose above the level of a mere gimmick or novelty, and then steal that feature and add it to the Tucker. It had a roll bar, headlights that tracked your turns, America's first rear-wheel, rear-engine drive configuration, a steering box set in front of the front axle to protect the driver in crashes, a padded dashboard, a pop-out windshield, and a re-envisioned control panel that's much closer to what you'd see in today's cars. You might notice these are all engineering innovations that seem practical and are still in use. Unlike, what about 3 wheels? Or, I bet turds would go real fast through the air if you pushed them. The Tucker was designed to be easy to repair, affordable, and look cool. The problem was, Preston was kind of cursed and/or bumbling when it came to the actual capitalism part of navigating capitalism.
You spent $5,200 on beer?
He'd get excited and rush to demonstrate a prototype to the public, revealing a bunch of technical issues that were still being worked out. Or he'd overpromise on features or affordability out of excitement, then have to backtrack when his team told him those benchmarks just couldn't be reached. He wasn't all sizzle because there was a car-shaped steak there, he just shouldn't have been selling it so loud, so hard, so fast. Especially because that drew the attention of the forces that really killed the Tucker. The big 3, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. They were great at the capitalism game, and, at least for car making, Tucker represents the moment that particular industry learned that playing the game beats good product design every time.
New car smell.
The key to bringing Tucker down was not in attacking his car, but rather the way he ran his business. He was innovative in that area too, raising funds via one of the country's first speculative stock IPOs and launching a pre-purchase program, whereby anyone who bought a Tucker accessory, even though the car wasn't out yet, was essentially saving their place in line to ensure they'd get one before the thing sold out.
Give me 30,000 tickets.
That'll be $950,000, please.
Look, the thing about that is I only got $10 on me. Can I pay you the rest later?
Sure.
You're totally allowed to do that, as long as you're a real company engaged in what's called a good faith effort to produce the promised product. But when corporate interests convinced the SEC to bring charges against Tucker, they put a team of high-priced lawyers to work trying to prove that the car was too far away from really existing to promise yet, which would count as fraud. We can only assume at least one of them was a tall, thin, nasally man with blue hair. Tucker eventually beat the charges and was totally exonerated, but that didn't matter because the real point of the trial was just to sour the public's view of the brand and put a stop to all the positive buzz surrounding the vehicle.
I grew up a generation too late, I guess, because now the way the system works, the loner, the dreamer, the
crackpot who comes up with some crazy idea that everybody laughs at, that later turns out to revolutionize the world, he's squashed.
Excellent.
Essentially, big business got together and crushed a perceived threat by burying it in red tape and bad PR with their vast army of lawyers and marketing execs.
I have 10 high-priced lawyers.
So, it turns out capitalism does incentivize innovation. The problem is that there comes a point at which it actually starts to de-incentivize it in order to incentivize the simple perpetuation of capitalism.
What about New Coke? Hey, I invented that.
But this video is about bad cars, not bad social systems.
Art, I agree with you in theory. In theory, communism works.
So let's see what the big money boys were able to cook up in the years following Tucker's demise. I mean, they have all the money and resources, right? They just demanded the spotlight. What you got, Ford? Show us the future. Show us the Edsel. Wow. Looks like an actual adult bumper car. Critics of the time accused the grille of resembling a horse collar, which I don't even know what that is. I googled pictures of horse collar, but the thing I found doesn't look like this car at all, so I'm not sure if it's the right thing. Frankly, because it's never been referenced on The Simpsons.
Because I am colorblind.
Michael Scott. Speaking of stupid bad names, the Edsel was named after Ford's son, Edsel Ford, both to imply that it was the next generation of horseless carriage, but also to keep the business in the hands of the family and secure their holdings in the Northland against the Dothraki. The problem was, Edsel was already a crappy old-fashioned name at the time, so the whole thing smacked of out-of-touch dudes trying to guess what the average person might go for. How about a wheel with a telephone dial in the middle that you shift gears with? That reads futuristic, right? The image of a rotary phone dial? That blew my mind in '02.
They didn't have white onions because of the war.
Interestingly, Edsel Ford himself and the whole Ford family lobbied against using the name, but by that point weren't in full control of the company. One of the marketing guys at Ford hired a famous poet to brainstorm names, and she came up with Utopian Turtletop, Pastelogram, Turco Tinga, Resilient Bullet, Canyonero, Andante con Moto, and the Mongoose Civique, or well-mannered mongoose. And I think Andante con Moto means slow with car. Am I right about that, Italian musicians? Post in the comments, because that would be hilario. Fun fact/callback, the name of that advertising exec was David Wallace. True story. A false story is that his assistant to the regional manager was named Lincoln, although that would be poetic. More poetic than Turco Tinga, which I think means, help, I'm having a stroke right now, oh no. In fact, it's likely the disastrous launch of the Edsel that the Homer episode is most specifically referencing. It's become an iconic example of design by committee, lack of market research, and other marketing failures that helped form modern marketing trends, which also suck, but for different reasons.
That's awful. It's like brainwashing.
Didn't you have ads in the 20th century?
Well, sure, but not in our dreams. Only on TV and radio. And in magazines, and movies, and at ball games, and on buses, and milk cartons, and t-shirts, and bananas, and written on the sky. But not in dreams. No siree.
Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Ford Pinto, which, after several high-profile accidents, became infamous for bursting into flames after minor rear-end collisions due to a poorly placed fuel tank. Finally, a real car that explodes if you shoot it in the fuel tank. Or, and this turned out to be the problem, lightly tap it from behind. Oh, they'll never be the darlings of the so-called city fathers who cluck their tongues, stroke their beards, and say, "What's to be done about these exploding death traps?"
Just get rid of the sugar, okay?
Obviously, marketing has gotten a lot more sophisticated since then. So public embarrassments like the one in the Simpsons app have to be exaggerated for comedic effect. They don't really happen these days.
Oh my fucking god. Well, maybe that was a little too hard.
Oh wait, I forgot about that. Nelson? Hey, this was the largest car episode I could afford. Should I therefore be made the subject of fun? Okay, that's 3 direct quotes in under a minute. That means I've stopped saying anything actually interesting. So please give me a like and a comment below. It will literally determine if there's more of this show or they release that fog that turns people inside out. Dental plan. Lisa needs braces. Dental plan. Lisa needs braces. Fuck, this is gonna get worse before it gets better. It begins! You can find more of my personal work at patreon.com/smallbeans or by searching for Small Beans on your podcaster of choice.